You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And hey, welcome to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin and I am flying solo for this week's mid-month book news check-in for August 2025. Reera is currently out of town for family business, but she will be back next week for our next author chat episode. As always, Books and Boba is supported in part by you, our listeners. So if you've been enjoying this podcast and want to become a bigger part of our book club, head on over to patreon.com/booksandboba, where as a Patreon supporter, you can gain access to our members-only Discord server, where you can chat with fellow book club members in real time about our current book club pick and a slew of other topics. And if you join us at the Honey Boba level, you also gain access to our monthly bonus podcast Boba Chats, as well as the ability to help us choose a quarterly Patron's Choice book club pick. Our next Patron's Choice will be our October book club pick. So if you join now, you can help us pick what spooky book to read in October. All right, so if you listened to a Marvin U.S. solo book news podcast before, this is going to be an abridged episode where I'll do my best to highlight the latest Asian American publishing announcements compiled from the deals listed on Publishers Marketplace. Apologies if this is not as detailed as the list Reera usually makes. And if I did miss any important publishing announcements that you're personally excited about, definitely let us know on Goodreads or on Discord. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started with this month's publishing announcements. All right, our first deal is Crown and Peter Joseph of Penguin Random House has acquired A.L. Chen's Slasher Summer. Pitched as a love letter to the campy horror movies of the 1980s, in which a group of friends reunite at the cabin where a cult movie was filmed, only to discover a real-life killer waiting for them. Publication is scheduled for next summer, 2026. This sounds like a lot of fun. E.L. Chen is a Canadian-based author whose previous works have included the YA fantasies Summerwood and Winterwood, which I just learned about by Googling E.L. Chen, and looks like a pretty cool take on like a Narnia-style otherworld fantasy adventure starring an Asian Canadian heroine, which all things that sound really great. Slasher Summer is E.L.'s adult horror debut and just looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. Horror is not a genre that I take to willingly, but I do have a soft spot for not only campy horror, but also meta takes on the genre as well. So this definitely sounds like a more, at least fun for me, type of horror novel. And definitely a book I'll be keeping in mind for next year's Spooky Month book club pick. But yeah, congrats to E.L. Chen for a very fun-sounding adult debut. All right, next up, Saga Press has acquired Katrina Kwan's Ambrosia, a fantasy in which a grieving widow must infiltrate a prestigious cutthroat order of alchemic scientists after discovering that her husband's suicide was actually a murder in which the iron in his blood has been turned to gold. Publication is set for spring 2027. Katrina Kwan is our second Canadian-based author for this month's slate of book announcements, and you know that's pretty cool as a Canadian myself. This sounds like a pretty fun fantasy murder mystery. The setup seems to have a lot of exciting tropes, infiltrating an institution, hidden identities, and the alchemy angle also seems interesting. And Katrina's other works include fantasy novels The Last Dragon of the East and the upcoming The Legend of the Nine-Tailed Fox, which are both Chinese and Eastern inspired fantasy settings. And alchemy, specifically turning metals to gold, has, I think, traditionally been more of a Western flavor of magic. But I am very curious to see if there is some sort of Asian spin on this. And if there isn't, that's fine too. Looking at Katrina's biography, she's definitely paid her dues in the industry, having worked several years as a ghostwriter for romance novels. So now that she's able to write using her own name, she can write whatever she wants. So congratulations to Katrina on her book deal, and looking forward to learning more about Ambrosia as it comes out. Okay, next up, Voyager has acquired in a preempt Katie Wu's debut fantasy novel, Madder Lake. Set at the world's foremost university for studying the magical art of transportive painting, two students from wildly different backgrounds battle to win a painting competition that could determine their fates as artists, and explores who has access to art and education, the true meaning of home, and the possibility of falling for your rival. Publication is currently scheduled in 2027. All right, let's see what we got here. We got a Magic Academy setting, so some dark academia vibes. It's also a magic art school, which hopefully that means there'll be some high culture shenanigans as well. And we have what seems to be either a rich girl, poor boy, star-crossed lover situation, or a poor girl, rich boy type of thing. And of course, a competition to really pull out that enemies to lovers dynamic. And yeah, transportive magic sounds like a cool magic system. Like it's giving portals to other worlds or portals to wherever you want to go. But yeah, feeling a lot of good, exciting things coming from this announcement. And I'm definitely excited to learn more about it as 2027 approaches. But yeah, congrats to Katie Wu on her book deal. All right, for our next deal, Thousand Voices has acquired in a preempt Lucy Tan's next novel, Tiger's Mouth, for fans of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Real Americans. In this book, the scrappy son of Chinese-American caterers hustles his way into an elite internship where he shares an office with the depressed heir of the tech company's founder, culminating in a fraught connection that spans years of friendship and rivalry, all while exploring the lonely cost of ambition and the downsides of technological advancement. No publication date has been listed. Yeah, I'm actually pretty interested in what this book seems to be exploring. Lucy's first book, What We Were Promised, follows a family who moves back to a more prosperous modern China after years of chasing the American dream. And it sounds like in the same way, Tiger's Mouth also follows the journey of someone chasing that American dream and how that changes someone. Like, going from a child of poor working class immigrants to tech mogul. And it sounds like the book will explore kind of the isolation that comes with gaining wealth and status, especially in an American context, but also the price paid to achieve that level of wealth and success, right? Especially in terms of big tech, where advancement often comes with an encroachment on, let's say, data privacy and security. And it really sounds like the type of literary fiction that really captures what, chasing that American dream looks like in this day and age, which is important because, we do need literature to be able to capture this moment for future generations to understand what it was like to live, in this country in 2025. Now, I am not super familiar with Chinese idioms and sayings. And if you grew up in a Chinese household, you know that 99% of the lessons that our parents tell us are all in idioms and sayings. There's the 4-word proverbs that we hear so much. I think they come from Confucianism. But I did a quick Google search and it looks like the tiger's mouth, one possible idiom where it comes from is 羊入虎口, which essentially means a sheep entering the tiger's mouth, which describes someone placing themselves in a very dangerous situation. I want to say this is probably the idiom that Lucy is drawing from, and it definitely gives the book the vibe of a business thriller, reminding me of titles like Barbarians at the Gate or Liar's Poker, although those I think are more nonfiction than fiction. But all that is to say that I like what this book is putting out and I'm excited to learn more. So congratulations to Lucy Tan on her new book deal. Okay, next up, William Morrow has acquired at auction Alicia Upano's debut novel, Everything to the Sea, a story of two young people who fall in love over the course of one summer, but who are torn apart when a sudden tsunami devastates their home island of Hawaii and follows their stories as they try to find their way back to each other over and over again over the years. Publication is set for summer 2026. Now, longtime listeners of this podcast will know that I'm not the biggest fan of second chance romance. I just think it's a very hard needle to thread in terms of making me root for a relationship that did not work the first time. And I know that this story is not second chance because there's no misunderstanding. The misunderstanding was a tsunami, which is more like an act of, nature, which I guess, is this a misconnections type of, I'm not sure what the terminology is, but I do vibe with the idea of searching for that one core memory, that one core relationship over the years. It kind of reminds me of the rom-com Serendipity, where it's fated lovers that are just effed with by fate and destiny, right? And I do love that it's in the context of people from Hawaii. Alicia Upano was born and raised in Hawaii, and it sounds like the main characters of this love story are locals, which has the potential of adding some really interesting layers to their journeys back to each other again, especially given the context of, what life is like on the islands for locals, as well as the effects of, what displacement does to people. So yeah, congrats to Alicia on her debut. Looking forward to learning more about the book next year. Next up, Algonquin has acquired in a preempt Theresa Hottel's Dust, a literary speculative novel set in 1930s Dust Bowl, Oklahoma against the backdrop of the Great Depression and the Chinese Exclusion Act. Dust follows the journey of a wanderer in search of otherworldly creatures and half-glimpsed fauna that roam the dry plains, as well as an isolated town as it battles for its soul. Publication is set for summer 2026. Yeah, I love a good speculative historical fiction. This sounds like it takes place in an alternate version of the Great Depression and the Oklahoma Dust Bowl. I'm definitely getting some Western vibes, a lone wanderer, an isolated town, but also some roadside picnic. The fact that there are otherworldly creatures within the Dust Bowl gives, kind of the Zone vibes too. And I'm really curious to see how the Chinese Exclusion Act plays into it. I wonder if the Wanderer himself is a Chinese man, and how that plays into his interactions with the town as well. And just generally, always happy to see Asian American history that's often skimmed over in our history class, explored in, genre fiction. Personally, I think it's a very effective way to communicate the horrors of policies like this in a digestible form. So definitely lots of things that I'm interested in this book, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about Theresa's debut. All right, next up is another deal from Algonquin Books, who has acquired the debut novel of Pushcart Prize winner Lisa Lee, American Han. American Han is the story of a Korean American family that ruptures when one son goes missing, and no one recognizes it as the warning sign it is until it erupts in a moment that indicts them all, challenging assumptions about assimilation and family. Publication is scheduled for spring 2026. All right, so if you listen to our latest Boba chat with Brad and Julia Ryu, we did discuss a little bit about the origins of the word Han, which, us in Asian American media recognize as like the Korean word describing the general sense of, I guess, mourning and grief in Korean culture. But I think regardless of our thoughts of where the word originates from, it has taken a life of its own within the context of like Korean American and Korean American stories and literature. And so I think the title American Han is really interesting. Like it kind of tells you what this book is going to be about. And I think at least with the description of the book that we have, this book really speaks to like my millennial Asian American heart. Like I think at the core of a lot of Asian American stories and millennial stories is like this same struggle against what happens when the facades of the American dream crumbles, right? Like our parents are sold this idea of what success means. They pass that down to us. And then as we grow up, we realize that the world was not set up for that. The world will not allow us to be that ideal. And sometimes that ends up being kind of the death of our relationships with, our family, with a society, with that dream. And in a way, it kind of does become like our own flavor of collective grief and suffering, right? The grief of like the life that was promised, the world that was promised to us, and the world that we are given. Not that is what this book is going to be about, but I do understand the implications of what a title like American Han is going for. And while this book definitely feels like a sad times bummer book, I am curious to see what Lisa does with these themes. So yeah, congrats to her on her debut. All right, moving on. Poison Pen Press has acquired Michelle Tang's She Waits Where Shadows Gather, a novel about a married couple who moved to the Philippines to renovate and sell the husband's ancestral family home until an unexpected accident delays their plans, forcing them to confront the unspeakable horrors of long-buried secrets and lingering resentment hidden beneath the walls and floorboards. Publication is set for spring 2026. I feel like we're getting a lot more of these like Asian-inspired, Asian-flavored gothic horror stories. I think recently there was also another book deal about family secrets lurking under a Vietnamese manor. And I think it's such a genius way to explore the ghosts, the literal ghosts of imperialism, colonization, capitalism that continues to haunt, especially places in Southeast Asia to this day. Now, reading more about the synopsis on other platforms, it sounds like the accident that the description alludes to is a car crash that leaves the husband trapped in his own body while the wife tends to him. And the house begins to stir and speaks to him in a voice only he can hear. So yeah, this is definitely a ghost story. And one can only imagine the types of ghosts that haunts a family with an ancestral family home in the Philippines. I think this is definitely another book to keep on the list for a future Spooky Month read. And I definitely love that Asian Gothic horror is becoming a thing. So congrats to Michelle on her book deal. All right, and for the last book deal for this episode, we have a middle grade deal. Harper Alley has acquired Abigail Hingwen's The Fidget Booth, a story about a sixth grader who learns to embrace his ADHD in order to overcome various obstacles, preventing him from finally adopting a puppy. The book will be illustrated by Maple Lamb and is set for publication in winter 2027. This sounds pretty cute. Abigail Hingwen, of course, is the author of the Lovable Taipei trilogy and has been on our podcast a few times to talk about her books. I think this book will be her second middle grade novel. I think her first one, The Veil, is coming out later this year. And I think it's cool for a book targeted for younger readers to feature characters with ADHD, both for kids who may have it themselves or have friends or classmates that has it, in order to create, more empathy and understanding, which I think is really important to instill in kids through, narratives like this. I do wonder, and maybe this is just my ignorance, what about having ADHD would prevent a kid from adopting a puppy? Is this like a requirement from the shelter, or is this, parents saying you can't have a puppy unless you prove that you're responsible enough to take care of one? My gut tells me it's probably the latter, because I can see parents who, like, if you have a kid who has trouble focusing on a task, that you want them to, prove to you that they can focus on the task of keeping a small animal alive before you go and get them that small animal. So great to see Abigail continue to write and put out work, and really cool to see her tackle representation in different forms as well. So congrats to Abigail on all her upcoming projects. And yeah, that was our last book deal for the month. And with that, that'll do it for this edition of Books and Boba's mid-month book news check-in. Thank you so much for bearing with me. And as always, let me know if I missed any upcoming books that you're particularly excited about by letting us know either on Goodreads or on Discord if you are a Patreon supporter. All right, before we go, just a quick reminder that our August 2025 book club pick is The Wangs versus the World by Jay Chang, about a Chinese-American family who takes a cross-country road trip after losing everything during the 2008 financial crisis. And as always, if you're reading along or if you finished the book, please let us know your thoughts on Goodreads or on Discord. I think by this Friday, we will have finished our read. And so all plot points throughout the entire book will be on the table to discuss. So yeah, really excited to hear everyone's thoughts about this book. And, please let us know, because we'd love to include your feedback on our discussion podcast episodes whenever possible as well. But with that, that'll do it for this episode of Books and Boba. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be back next week at full strength for our next author chat. So see you all next time on Books and Boba. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Reera Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Instagram by going to @BooksandBoba and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Great news! The Korean Drama Podcast is back for our 6th season.
The Korean Drama Podcast is the podcast about watching Korean dramas by people who don't watch Korean dramas. Hosted by Candace, Jane, and me, Kim.
Wait, if it's our 6th season, can we still say we're people who don't watch Korean dramas?
I'm sure it's fine. Let's just call it character development, which we love in K-dramas.
For our new season, we're recapping the hit 2025 romantic fantasy series Heavenly Ever After, about an elderly couple who reunite in the afterlife. Only he's now in his 30s while she's chosen to appear in her 80s.
Awkward.
So join us each week as we discuss the highs and lows of the afterlife in Heavenly Ever After, episode by episode.
Part of the Potluck Podcast Collective.